Welcome to Experts Explain Trauma. Today, Dr. Jessica joins us to answer a common question that survivors ask about binge and emotional eating, as well as give us tips to help us on our healing journey. Okay, Dr. Jessica, here's our question. Why can't I just stop? What is wrong with me? This is a question I ask myself many, many times.
Okay. This is a super common question, and this is the one that I get typically all the time as well. As soon as I meet somebody for like the first intake appointment or online in my Facebook group, like this is the one people are like, I just don't understand because I know I don't want to binge eat anymore. And I wake up with great intentions, but then they all fall apart the same day, right? And it's a vicious cycle. So first of all, I just kind of want to normalize it because it makes a lot of sense. If you spent years trying to fix it, and I use that with quotes, right? Fix it, right? And nothing has worked, of course, your mind is going to automatically go to, well, there's got to be something wrong with me, right? It's all on me. So um, the first thing I want to say is nothing is wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with
Yay!
nothing is wrong with your viewers. Nothing is wrong with me. We're not broken. One of the biggest myths that I frequently talk about with my clients is that binge eating is not about willpower. Okay, it has nothing to do with willpower. It has nothing to do with you not trying hard enough. It's not a character flaw. Binge eating is a coping mechanism.
Mm,
That is the biggest thing to understand. It's a very actually smart way, and it's been a very adaptive way of your brain trying to protect you. It's trying to keep you soothed and regulated. And so your brain has done the very best thing for you in that moment to keep you alive and functioning, right? And so that we see as super, super flawed is actually been a superpower. Now, I'm not saying that binge eating is the thing that we should continue doing every day because there are some very obviously like serious consequences to it, sometimes physically, definitely emotionally.
yeah.
So there are definitely different ways that we want to work with it. But I think one of the first things to understand with answering this question of like, what is wrong with me is there's nothing wrong with you. Binge eating has tried to help you.
Oh,
So I think that's a big piece of it.
yeah.
And then we can talk about like, why has it tried to help you, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Why has it tried to help you? And so I couple of things I like to talk about with this is number one is well, let's talk about like why it showed up in the first place, which is about survival, not willpower, survival. So oftentimes binge eating is really linked to trauma. Okay? And so the biggest statistic or the most latest statistic that I have is 83% overlap, meaning for those who are actually binge eaters, 83% of them have a history of some sort of trauma.
God,
That's
those
a
numbers are
huge,
so high.
that's a huge statistic. That is so big. And so, if you're treating binge eating disorder, I also say you're treating trauma. And if you're treating trauma as like a clinician, you're also going to run into binge eating disorder because the overlap is so big. So when you think about like the trauma impact with binge eating, you got to understand like the binge eating is because of past trauma. It has shown up to help you stay safe and regulated. It has tried to help your nervous system calm down and take care of itself. And so that's where like food becomes the fastest, quickest way of feeling soothed and regulated, right? And so it's one of the easiest ways to get quick relief from fear, panic, shame, loneliness, isolation, and so forth. And so we know that like when your brain perceives something as a threat, we go into like fight or flight mode or
Hmm.
freeze,
Yeah.
right? And so, depending on the trauma situation, and I'm not saying you're actually in trauma or in
Right.
danger in that moment,
Right.
right? It's like you could be out taking a walk and like see somebody and they might look at you funny, and your brain is like, danger, danger, danger,
Yep.
right? Danger, right?
Hmm.
And even though your brain says, oh, that's a very serious thing, we need to run away from that, could just be the neighbor out for a stroll. They
Right.
have
Right.
nothing to do with it, right? But in that moment, your brain is like sending a red alert to your amygdala. And your amygdala then triggers another series of changes. I won't go into all the neuroscience kind of stuff today. But essentially, your system gets flooded with adrenaline and cortisol. Those are stress responses. And one of the fastest ways to shut off a stress response is through food. Okay. And so that is why I always see binge eating as a coping response for trauma. It is trying to regulate your nervous system. Your nervous system is responsible for keeping you calm.
I do have a question about that because I was sitting here thinking about my emotional eating and binge eating, and I learned it from my father.
Hmm.
I realize I learned, is it a learned thing? Because my mom was not a binge eater, but my dad, I would sit there and watch him gulp down his dinner,
Yeah,
gulp down and keep eating. And so I learned from him. Is it a kind of a learned thing as well? I mean, how did I figure it out otherwise?
right. It could, well, and it could be a learned behavior. And it's also depending on if we're talking about binge eating or emotional eating.
Oh, that's true. They are
Right.
different. That's true. I was more emotional. Right.
And I know we had talked about that on your prior podcasts and so forth, but like, yeah, I think there's a difference with that too. Although I will say, like, food is also something like what you just talked about is not uncommon. I hear my clients say that it's, I sat with my mom or my dad or my grandmother, right? And like we just ate together,
Yeah.
right? And so it can be a way to connect with our caregivers,
Oh.
right? And so I think
Mm-hmm.
about that piece, which is like so especially like and I don't know your history with your dad, but if you don't have any other relationship, you don't have a closeness with that person, sometimes it's like food is the common shared interest,
Yeah.
right? And so sometimes it's like we bond over food.
Right. Right. And we often celebrate with food. We do a lot of things with food besides giving our body nutrients, but it is a thing of it was
Yeah.
also given to me as a reward.
Yes.
Like I'd go to the doctor, and if I was a good girl, we get to stop by A&W, and I'd get an A&W root beer float, that kind of thing. Hmm.
Yeah. And so we get a lot of different messages about
Right.
food.
Right.
Right. But then we also grow up in a culture that says you shouldn't be drinking that A&W root beer float
Right.
because it's not
Yeah.
okay. Right. So like it's very complicated then, especially like when you think about like being a 6-year old or an 8-year old, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
One, it's like, here's your root beer float for being good, but the next day you can't have it because if you drink it, then you'll be bad.
Right. 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 You're gonna get fat. I get told you keep drinking
Exactly.
that, you're gonna get fat. And I
Right.
did. I got fat.
So what's a woman to do? Right. And
Right.
especially
Right.
what's a 6-year old to do, right?
Yeah.
Because
So
that's very confusing.
it is very confusing. So what do we do with this message? What do we do? I mean, how do we overcome this kind of message?
What particular message?
Well, just, why can't I just stop? Like, is there something that the listeners can, a tip or something that can at least kind of help them get through? I know a lot of this is probably going to be cleared up through therapy, right?
Yes, I think therapy is huge. I will say, like, if with binge eating, you always want to work with somebody who is trained in it. Always, always, always. Please ask your therapist. You have every right to ask your therapist, are you trained in binge eating disorder? What do you know about it? What's your experience? So we can talk about that later, but I just want to throw that out there, disclaimer. But for your viewers, as far as like, okay, so what's wrong with me? Why can't I stop? I would say I would reframe the question first of all, right? So the question is not why can't I stop? The question is better framed as what is this binge trying to do for me? Right? Or what is my body needing? What is my body trying to tell me? What pain is my brain trying to protect me from? So I would say we got to change the question in order to truly get the answers to that, right? Because and trauma is one piece of it too. Like trauma is one piece of. There's the other pieces are like that diet binge cycle that we get stuck in. Right? And if I can talk a little bit about that too, if that would help your viewers, where it's maybe you didn't grow up with like massive trauma that you're, conscious of or anything like that, but maybe it's more of like, well, I just grew up with a family that were constantly dieting, right? And so I received a lot of messages about healthy foods versus unhealthy foods in my body and so forth. Um, and that led me to start dieting at an early age, right? And when you start dieting at an early age, you start messing with your body, right? And you start messing not just with how your body looks, but more importantly, your insides of your body. So now we had to talk about metabolic health. We had to talk about, yo-yo dieting and long-term impacts of that and all of these things, right? But for the point of this question, like the whole question of like what's wrong with me is like, well, There's nothing wrong with you. Binge eating has started because it's trying to protect you. And maybe it's trying to protect you because you have a history of trauma and it's trying to soothe you. But maybe it's trying to protect you because you've spent years of your life yo-yo dieting and it doesn't
Mm.
trust you. It
Oh,
doesn't trust you that you're going to feed it.
oh my gosh, that's so true. It thinks you're in starvation mode.
Yes.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
So if I'm going to like break it down just to one sentence as far as like why does binge eating happen? It's two things. It's deprivation, and that can be physical deprivation of food or mental deprivation, which we can talk about. Um, but then also the emotional dysregulation.
Ah, that was mine.
Yeah, which is the trauma piece and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's different factors kind of at play, and still I still maintain there's nothing wrong with you. It's what don't you know about your binging or emotional eating?
Right. And I'll tell you, just reframing that question puts a stop. It gives that space that I would need between just going on into that kitchen and grabbing a bag of chips and having a heyday with it. But yeah, it also, when you said that, when you reframed it, it's empowering instead of
And
disempowering.
yeah, yes, absolutely. And I'm glad you said that word because I feel like that is one of the most beneficial ways of looking at binge eating disorder, right? Like so many people feel disempowered, like just powerless over it, right? When really, like their brain and body has actually just been trying to help them the whole time. And so if we can work with your brain and your body, right, there comes a lot of empowerment. And with that comes a lot of healing and so forth.
Right, right. Oh, this is so good though. Yeah, I like it. So the answer to this question, basically, what would help our listeners is just to reframe the question, rather than asking what's wrong with us. What is my body trying to tell me? What is going on here? What is it trying to tell me?
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. And so one, you're not broken. There's
Hmm.
nothing wrong with you. Take a deep breath and then ask yourself, what is my body trying to say? What is my binge part trying to tell me?
And I think the easiest way to do that is to sit down and journal. And when I do that, when I ask myself a question like that, I just start writing what's in my head, right? I just let it all out and then I read it, and you'd be surprised. You would be surprised what your brain is trying to tell you.
If yes, yes, and I agree with that. I always encourage at least 3 to 4 minutes of journaling before we eat. Like you're always allowed to
Ooh.
eat. You're always allowed to eat. You always need to give yourself permission to eat because once you say like, nope, I'm never binging again, we're kind of screwed.
Yeah, you're going to binge eat a lot.
We've kind of mucked that up a bit. But yeah, so I always say like, you're always allowed to eat, but why don't we fill up on awareness before we fill up on food,
Ooh,
right?
ooh, okay. I like that.
Now, I will say that's a great idea in theory. A lot of times people cannot do that.
Yeah, that's true.
And,
That's true. Because one day it might be easy, and another day it might be like, I am not in the mood to do this, right?
uh, and I will also say that seems to be one of the differences too between emotional eating and binge eating. So it's
Ah,
when you're emotionally eating versus like a true binge. Like sometimes a binge can feel almost like out of body, like somebody else is in charge of me right now, and I absolutely like a journal, no idea, right? And so there's that's one of the biggest differences. And so that's where with true binge eating, it's like maybe we in order to journal, you have to have your prefrontal cortex involved, right? Which is this part of the brain up here that allows you to think through things
logically. Hmm.
logically. Yep. And when you are trauma triggered, that part shuts down
That's true.
and you are in your fight or flight amygdala space,
True.
right? And so now we're all in the body. And so we don't have access to our prefrontal cortex, which makes journaling sometimes just very almost impossible to get to.
Right. Yeah.
So we first need to bring our body back down and regulate it. And then journaling can feel more accessible. So you also have to ask yourself, well, is it like if I have no access to journaling, right? Then how do I regulate my body first to make it an option? So this is where we talk about nervous system regulation and sympathetic down to parasympathetic and all of those fancy neuroscience sciencey things. So hopefully that helped.
Yes, yes, that helped a lot. So yeah, this is great. I'm learning so much on these questions. One question and I learned so much. It's crazy.
It's very complicated. Like there's so many layers.
There
It's a lot.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot. And then what's interesting is the difference between the binge eating and the emotional eating, because I was definitely emotional, but I don't know if this is part of binge, but I know that there were times I wish I would understand what the time was, but I get how you just jump from something happened and your face is in the food,
Yeah.
your face is in and hiding, like finishing off a bag of chips and hiding the bag. Like
Mm,
that was like kind of the worst. Some of the stuff I did is I would hide the wrapper. I didn't want anybody to know that I had all that.
yes. Yes. And secrecy and hiding food, it's not one of our official criteria,
Right.
quote, with binge eating disorder, but it's definitely one of the patterns that we see for sure.
Oh God, I didn't do it that often, and I wasn't a middle of the night eater either. I
Hmm.
never got up in the middle. I know some people did, but yeah, just that I try to make a deal with myself. I'm just going to eat a little bit, and then next thing I know, it's gone. And so one of the things that I have done is I do allow, like if I want chips, I do allow myself the chips, but I pour them in a bowl. I take
Hmm.
my smallest bowl and I fill, and it's satisfying.
Yes. Yep. And that, yes, that is a technique that works really well for some people, right? They have to have, I think, done enough awareness work and enough work around trauma, honestly, to access that.
True. Yeah, yeah. It took me a long time to get here. A long
Yes.
time to get here, just because
Yep.
my healing journey has been very long. So yeah, that was something that I struggle with, most of my life. I'm 61. So I would say that I've got my eating much more under control now. And it's only been probably like the last 4 or 5 years, really, honestly. So it's been a long, long journey. Long journey.
Yes, it's such a complicated subject. So,
If this question resonates with you, or you have your own question you want to ask an expert, let us know in the comments and make sure to follow so you can get more insights on trauma healing.